Good morning to everyone. My name is Gordon Flake. I'm the CEO of the Perth USAsia Centre, and we're delighted to welcome all of you here this morning for the public launch of our new report, An Investment-Led Strategy for Building Australia-India Economic Relations. But perhaps more importantly, to welcome the Indian High Commissioner to Australia, Ambassador Manpreet Vohra, for his first ever visit to Western Australia, and probably that's more our fault than yours, but we're delighted to have you here. We are now on one of the most beautiful venues in Perth. Yesterday we had a similar event down at the beautiful UWA campus, and today we've deliberately closed off the view of the Swan River so the speakers will not be distracted. But the rest of the audience will have your choice between looking out over the city and paying attention to the podium today. As is the tradition of the Perth USAsia Centre and the University of Western Australia, we wanted to make sure that we started out these proceedings with a formal welcome to country. And to do this, we are delighted and honoured to invite Ingrid Cummings. Most of you will probably have participated in a welcome to country with Ingrid before, and you'll see in a moment why I say participated rather than just listened passively. But Ingrid is a Wajak Noongar woman from Fremantle. Remarkable experience in business. She's the founder of Cart Kun Wien, and has been nominated for numerous awards for that business and the work that she's done there. A graduate of both Murdoch University and Melbourne Business School. Internationally has had this tremendous profile with the United Nations Women's Collective and speaking at TEDx and many of the things that I would like to do at one point in my life. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ingrid for our formal welcome to country.
Kaya maman yoga yau calling nija maya maya ngai Ingrid Cummings ngai murtang nija maya nija karakumba wa yau calling corporate wear engineering yang ngai nuna wa jenjen cool nija buja wa ma barning ma nija korea ya bodawa. Pretty good, eh? It's a delight to be here with you all here at Karakumba, or Kings Park as we now know it, on very strong ancestral country for the Wajak Noongar people, in which I am one of about 38,000 that live across the southwest. It is an honour to be able to do Wanji Buja, or Welcome to Country, on behalf of my elders past, present, and to hopefully encourage and inspire the future generations to be able to stand up here one day to do the same. Thank you for that very lovely introduction. I am really honoured to be able to welcome you here. This is a very special place for the Wajak Noongar people. It's our spiritual Mecca up on this hill. It's a place specifically too very strong for women. So it's made famous by an incredible woman by the name of Fanny Bulbuck, who was a very strong female advocate. She was many things, but she was very loud and proud about her rights to country and helping people understand why this place was so important. And that female songline, or that important narrative of country, runs all the way up from this particular place all the way down to Muddagarrup, down near Harrison Island here in Perth. So we stand on very significant women's country, but we also stand on very significant men's country and gender-neutral country. But it's a place of celebration and people coming from all over to be with each other, to have good yarns and to think about how they go forward in the future. So a great place for you guys to have your event. My welcomes are interactive. My ancestors don't discriminate. They don't care. They don't care about your skin colour. They don't care about where you're from in the world. They don't even care if you're an Eagles supporter. They will love you regardless. Dockers are doing pretty well this season, you've got to admit. So they care about good head, heart and spirit. So we want everyone to have an opportunity to connect to country and feel that real strong sense of connection that we feel, and we continue to carry on as part of our duties as custodians of this place. So I'll get you to clap your hands with me. If you saw me yesterday, then you know the drill. If not, all you need to do is clap your hands to the same beat as I. I'm going to sing a songline that connects all the way out from the hills, a place called Kalamurda, said with an Aussie accent, Kalamunda. So Kalamunda, the home place of fire, and ceremony. So as we are coming together, ceremony or gathering, and to do important work together and talk about important things in the future, I thought this song would be the best one to share today. So $50 to anyone who can translate my song. Are you ready? All right. Don't need even a microphone. How good's that? If you're wondering what I was singing, by the way, I'll give you the heads up. It's a passionate cry out to spirits of country to say, come, look at all of us sitting here on this beautiful country, the country of our ancestors and all of our families. May we all go forward together strong here on this beautiful place. Welcome, welcome to everyone that gathers here on beautiful Whadjuk Noongar country. So I'll leave you with this. I'm not just Noongar. Nope, I have other ancestry too. I have English ancestry, I have Dutch ancestry, and I also have Russian ancestry. I'm a physical form of a Black Russian. How good is that? So growing up, it was this really weird thing. They had this law in this country which said that Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people couldn't be together. It was really strange. But my mum and dad, they lived under those laws at the time, but they believed in their Kaat Court Wirran, the very inspiration of my company. It's all about head, heart and spirit. So me standing here 38 years later is proof, isn't it? When people from around the world, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, come together, beautiful things can be created, ladies and gentlemen. So in the spirit of that, enjoy your yarns today from all over the world and all of our cultures and all of our strengths we bring to this room today. And we wish you well from wherever you go from here, and know you are always welcome here on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. I couldn't think of a better framing of our discussion today than Kaat Court Wirran. I don't think I said that quite right, but it is obviously our head, our heart. And what's the third one, Ingrid? I missed the last one. Spirit. Thank you. I appreciate that. We are extremely fortunate to have that welcome to country kind of tie us to the place we're at right now. And also to be reminded that there are limitations to Google Translate. I'm not going to get my $50 today. It didn't work in terms of the process. Our next speaker is the Honourable Deputy Premier of Western Australia. I think most of you in this room will know the Honourable Roger Cook. He's the member for the seat of Kwinana. He's been in the Legislative Assembly since 2008. He has the responsibility for the Ministry of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation. And for us in the international affairs community, we're really delighted to have the Deputy Premier take on that portfolio because it elevates it in the priority of the state, and I think you'll see that in his remarks today. I do want to add a little bit of a personal note here because for an Indian community, and I'm looking out in the Indian Australian community here too, despite his tremendous accomplishments in his political career, being Deputy Premier is a pretty amazing thing. I do understand that the Deputy Premier's older brothers are doctors. And so you have something in common with probably every Indian Australian here. So no matter what you accomplish in your life, your parents will probably be disappointed that you're not a doctor in terms of our success. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the Deputy Premier, the Honourable Roger Cook.
Thank you, Gordon. Yes, a bitter disappointment to my father, I'm sure. I mean, when I first started in the health portfolio, the AMA used to say to me, "So your grandfather was a doctor?" I said, "That's right." And it says, "And your father was a doctor?" I went, "Yes." He says, "So what happened to you?" Not to worry, but despite that disappointment, we plough on. Thank you, Gordon, for your introduction, and thank you once again, Ingrid, for your wonderful welcome to country. This is indeed sacred land which we stand on, so let us all just acknowledge our traditional owners the Whadjuk people of the proud Noongar Nation and give thanks for sharing this extraordinary country with them. I hope you'll forgive me if I begin just with a few acknowledgements. I think it's appropriate to do so, but obviously I'd like to acknowledge His Excellency High Commissioner for India, Mr. Manpreet Vohra. It's lovely to see you here today. But there's others in the audience as well. We've got the Governor, the Honourable Kim Beazley AO, lovely to see you, as well as former members of Parliament, the Honourable Stephen Smith and the Honourable Chris Evans, both former bosses. So I'll do my best to perform this morning. But can I also just acknowledge parliamentary colleagues in the State Parliament, Jess Shaw, MLA, Parliamentary Secretary Yas Mubarakai, and the Honourable Brian Walker, who I think is not with us today. And we send our absolute sincere thoughts to him and his family. And I'd also like to thank the Perth USAsia Centre for hosting this event and commend the Centre, particularly Professor Gordon Flake and Sonia Arakkal, for this report. This report is very timely indeed, and with the momentum around the interim Australia-India Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement being signed and the new Australian Government-India Economic Strategy being launched. I'm very excited to welcome the Indian High Commissioner, His Excellency Mr. Manpreet Vohra, to Western Australia for his first official visit in person. Welcome to Western Australia. We are a place like no other, and I just hope you have the opportunity to see some of our great state while you are here. Of course, it's not the High Commissioner's first event here. He participated in our very successful India Connect event in October last year via online or virtually, and I think you'll agree, High Commissioner, that was a great event and really spoke large about the level of excitement that there is in relation to in terms of the economic partnership that we see between Western Australia and India going forward. But it's, as I said, it's wonderful to have you here in person, and I hope you get the opportunity to experience our hospitality. And it is my pleasure to be here today to discuss Australia and India's joint economic ambitions, a country I've enjoyed visiting on a number of occasions, and I look forward to taking the relationship to the next level in the future. In line with the Western Australian Government's Asia Engagement Strategy 2019-2030, Our Future with Asia, our focus is to deepen the ties between Western Australia and India. As home to the world's second largest population, second largest startup ecosystem and sixth largest economy, India continues to grow exponentially. Western Australia and India share a significant strategic and economic partnership formed through a long history of trade links and warm people-to-people links. The Western Australian Government is committed to strengthening these links and exploring the new opportunities of a disrupted economies. Western Australia has been the largest contributor to the national economy in the last few years, and India and Western Australia maintain a significant trading partnership with total trade in goods valued at $4.6 billion in 2021, which accounts for over 17% of total trade between Australia and India. There is no doubt that Western Australia has a critical role to play in taking the relationship with India to the next level. The key to unlocking the relationship with India is through those people-to-people connections. I'm excited to say that India is the state's largest market for international students. We are grateful to these students for enhancing our cultural diversity and profiling us as a global hub for learning, research and innovation. To ensure our students have a welcoming experience in Western Australia, we supported the launch of the Study Perth Student Hub. The hub has been designed with a digital and wellbeing first approach to connect students with free employment, mental health and legal support. The hub also connects students to business networks, providing them with an opportunity to launch their career as our future innovators, entrepreneurs and investors in Western Australia. Western Australia's Indian community is an important part of the culturally diverse fabric of our state, with almost 49,000 people born in India residing in Western Australia and approximately 80,000 claiming India or Indian heritage. Having a strong Indian student and diaspora in Western Australia is a great foundation for increasing the collaboration and connectivity with India. I'm proud to say, in our own form of direct investment into India, the Western Australian government was the first Australian state to establish an official permanent presence in India, setting up a trade and investment office in Mumbai in 1996. We are celebrating 25 years of government's continuing presence in India, and the Mumbai office remains a key connection point for government and industry on both sides. Through our hub and spoke model, we intend to expand our presence across India and the Gulf region in the coming years. I'm pleased to announce that we recently appointed our new Investment and Trade Commissioner for the India Gulf region, Nashid Chaudhary, who is here today and you will hear from later on. Nashid has 2 decades of investment and trade economic development experience and has previously been involved in the establishment of strategic relationships into India. Nashid is also proficient in Hindi, Bengali and Urdu. Nashid is leading a long-standing and highly motivated team, and I encourage you all to reach out to either the Invest and Trade Western Australia Perth Hub or the team in the Mumbai office to discuss your export and investment plans. As a state government entity, we are here to help navigate and facilitate some of the challenges and complexities which have been identified in this report today. I was pleased to visit India in 2017, including a visit to the Western Australia's sister state, Andhra Pradesh. Our sister state agreement with Andhra Pradesh was signed in 2016 and seeks to create opportunities for collaboration between our 2 regions. Due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, we are now looking at Andhra Pradesh with a renewed focus and are keen to explore other strategic partnerships across India aligned with Diversify WA, which is our state's economic development framework. The Premier travelled to India in 2019 with a delegation which included representatives from a range of peak industry bodies, including Perth Airport and the Australian cricket legend and then Tourism WA Ambassador Adam Gilchrist, to discuss trade, investment and tourism opportunities. Although I think the Premier was heard to be complaining at the time that all people wanted to talk about, and 2 was Adam Gilchrist about cricket. I'm looking forward to visiting India later this year and look forward to taking a large industry delegation with me to work alongside the business community and make sure that we have a strong presence and a strong opening statement in terms of our reconnection with this important economic partner. And in Western Australia, we recognise that direct investment is fundamental to build trust, establish networks, and strengthen business ties to grow the bilateral economic relationship. The launch of today's report is very timely as the Western Australian Government has launched the landmark $100 million Investment Attraction Fund. The fund will help to accelerate the state's economic diversification agenda by supporting investment into these targeted opportunities that will shift the dial for Western Australia's economic future. The fund is currently open for expressions of interest, and we encourage all applications from Indian businesses, both in here and in India, to really take advantage of this fund. The report today outlines that unlocking the relationship with India and Australia is done through facilitating joint ventures and partnerships. To achieve this, there needs to be a focus on shared priorities, which we can leverage our respective strengths and capabilities to drive economic development and, importantly, diversification. This includes industry sectors such as primary industries, mining and mining equipment, technology and services, energy, critical minerals, and health and medical life sciences, all of which are outlined in our strategy Diversify WA. Major infrastructure projects and growing innovative ecosystems in cybersecurity, space, and data analytics will also be a strong focus between India and Western Australia. By playing to our strengths, we can unlock new opportunities, attract investment, boost the value of our exports, create jobs, and secure our supply chains. With the recent opening of the state's borders, we are pleased to be implementing the $185 million Reconnect WA package to safely re-engage with the world. And Western Australia enjoys travelling, and we welcome all international visitors to our beautiful state, particularly from India. An important component of our $185 million package is the $75 million Aviation Reconnect package, which is about ensuring that we can rebuild those aviation links, which are so important for business and tourist opportunities. And I, like you, have a determination to make sure that we can secure those direct aviation links between Perth and India as an important part of making sure we can continue to grow all our markets and all our opportunities. Prior to the pandemic, India was Western Australia's 11th largest source of international visitors in 2019. We can do better. And with the men's ICC T20 World Cup scheduled to be held in Australia from October to November, we hope to welcome our Indian friends to enjoy one of our shared loves, cricket. And Your Excellency, we look forward to welcoming you back here to enjoy this opportunity in one of the, I think, globe's great international sporting stadiums at Optus Stadium. And following today's event, I look forward to an ongoing dialogue with all of you around the room to continue the growth of trade and investment links with India. On the 26th of April 2022, we are planning to hold an India Gulf Connect event to highlight the opportunities and trends between Western Australia and the Indian Gulf region. We look forward to your participation at this event to share some of the key trade and investment opportunities on hand, as well as our plan to support your access into India. We are anticipating a major milestone in the Australia-Indian relationship with the interim Australia-India Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, and I look forward to seeing an exponentially stronger relationship. India and Western Australia are key to one another's economic diversification and continued prosperity. I'm delighted that we can all be here today to deepen our mutual understanding and foster new partnerships. Thank you again to the High Commissioner of India for your visit to Western Australia, and I hope this is the start of many to come. Thank you again to the Perth USAsia Centre, and I look forward to seeing many more publications and events of this nature to strengthen the India-Western Australia partnership. I also look forward to working with you all to strengthen the government's commitment to increasing engagement, cooperation and collaboration with India. Thank you very much and have a great morning.
Thank you very much, Deputy Premier. We do realise that it's a busy day in Parliament, and for you to make time so early in the morning speaks to the priority that the state government in Western Australia as a whole places on this relationship, as does this audience. It is so good to see people in person. We appreciate you all kind of working your way through the various protocols that we have, and we particularly appreciate the fact that we've got open borders. And that as much as we've enjoyed having communication with the High Commissioner virtually, it's wonderful to have him here with us in person in this venue. We are now honoured to receive a keynote address from the High Commissioner of India, Ambassador Manpreet Vohra. I think many of you will have seen his bio in the materials we sent out, but he is one of India's most distinguished diplomats. He's had a career of well over 30 years. By my count, he was ambassador or accredited as ambassador to no fewer than 6 countries before coming to here. So he's well practiced, well experienced. And having arrived in Canberra just last year, has already made a tremendous splash. If you've watched the news at all over the last year, you'll see that the level of attention that is being paid to India internationally is unparalleled in our recent history. The role that India plays importantly in the Quad, the role that India plays in terms of our project diversification as a state and as a country, the role that India plays in the broader international community means that regardless of where you are on the planet, India is an important part of your strategy. and that extends on from security issues to economic and trade investment issues. And so in that context, it is a great honor for us to welcome High Commissioner Manpreet Vohra for his first trip to Western Australia and to give a keynote speech to kind of kick off the launch of this report today.
Namaste. Good morning to each and every one of you. Thank you for being here today. I'm particularly honored that His Excellency the Governor, His Excellency the Deputy Premier, many other members of Parliament, parliamentary secretaries, senior officials are here this morning. It is an early start, as Gordon said, and it's delightful really to see that so many of you have turned up to listen to me, to attend this event. An event which is very opportune, if I may say. It's been an incredible less than 48 hours in the India-Australia relationship. Less than 40 hours ago, I think, the two Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Morrison and Prime Minister Modi, held their virtual summit, at which we agreed on some landmark new initiatives to take the relationship forward. We then, just yesterday morning, the Honourable Dan Tehan launched the updated India Economic Strategy report in Melbourne. And here we are, less than 24 hours later in Perth, with the centre here launching the investment-led strategy for building Australia-India economic relations, launching this wonderful report this morning. Now, serendipitous as this constellation of events over the last 48 hours may seem, I don't think I'll put it down only to astrology. I actually see in this constellation the reflection of a very large, very welcome, and very important geopolitical realignment that has developed in the last few years and which has evolved the India-Australia relationship into a wider strategic partnership for the benefit of both of us, as also for other nations of our common Indo-Pacific region. And that's because India and Australia have, in a sense, rediscovered that we are actually natural partners. We are united by shared values, strong belief in the fundamentals of rule of law, democracy, and pluralism. We are united also by history, by tradition, by the common love of cricket, by Adam Gilchrist and a whole host of other stars. Shane Warne, who we lost just recently, he was a legend in India. His name is so well known amongst practically every man, woman, and child in India. It's incredible to see the outpouring of emotion and recollection that followed Shane Warne's untimely demise. But we've now, as Gordon also mentioned, we now into a comprehensive strategic partnership since June of 2020. And that reflects our growing and broadening relationship across multiple domains, traditional, contemporary, and futuristic. But I want to focus this morning on what is the very pithy title of this report that the Perth USAsia Centre has launched. And I haven't, met the author yet, Sonia. But Sonia, if you're in the room, which I'm sure you are. Is she in the room, Gordon?
Not yet, I'll explain.
Okay, all right. She'll explain it. He'll explain it later. But this is incredibly important, and I would focus on the first part of the title of the report, that it needs to be an investment-led strategy between India and Australia. For too long, I think, it's been just trade-focused. It's just been about export and import. And exports and imports, by their very nature, by their very definition, are fickle. They depend on commodity prices, they depend on business cycles, they depend on oscillations of demand and supply, and therefore can never really be as long-lasting and as fundamental to an economic partnership as investments and doing business in more fundamental ways with each other can. So this is really the most important part which we need to focus on. I have been saying, and I have repeated it even in recent days, that to an extent, Australian businesses, Australian corporates might have missed a trick in not being more integral and benefiting more or seizing the opportunity more of the Indian growth story. Even last year, the year of the pandemic, the year of the Delta waves, perhaps nothing worse could have hit the planet for a long time to come and may not for much more. But even last year, during the pandemic, India attracted almost $82 billion worth of foreign direct investment, $81.9 billion to be precise. And we got this from a whole host of countries, from all continents. We've certainly had the Japanese and the Koreans from Northeast Asia. We have several countries from Southeast Asia who've invested heavily in India. We have a huge number of countries and companies from Europe who have invested, including much smaller countries and much smaller economies than Australia. We have the West Asians, the Gulf countries investing very heavily into India, and of course, we also have North America, the USA, Canada, etc. But if you were to disaggregate the figure of $81.9 billion, and if you were to examine it in a more granular sense, you will find that the Australian part of that is extremely low. Now, clearly, if the rest of the world, if the multinational corporations, if the smaller and medium enterprises from a huge number of countries from all over the planet do see, even in these times, value in investing in India, profitability in investing in India, business sense in investing in India, clearly there is something lacking from Australia. And that is what I would seek to change. That is what the governments certainly seek to change. That is what the Honourable Roger Cook, the Deputy Premier, just mentioned, that we must change. And that is what this report intends to highlight. Even yesterday, as I mentioned, Dan Tehan launched the updated India Economic Strategy report. The byline under the term Indian Economic Strategy, when it was first launched in 2016, was navigating from potential to delivery. The byline of the updated report launched yesterday said, accelerating our economic integration, because that is what is required, that is what is an obvious opportunity, economic integration between India and Australia. We are complementary economies. Nothing could make greater sense when you look at what India needs, what India can bring to the table, what Australia can bring to the table, what Australia can give, and what Australia needs itself. Nothing could make better sense. We just need to energize the folks in the boardrooms to look at India with greater degree of attention, with a little more effort, with a little more resources spent on looking at India once again. In the foreword to the Indian Economic Strategy, updated IES, launched yesterday morning, in the foreword, Dan Tehan says that long-term ambition of Australia is through sustained strategic investments in the economic relationship between India and Australia. He goes on to say that for Australia to build a stronger, more dynamic and competitive economy, the relationship with India is important. He specifically addressed businesses and industries when he said that Australian businesses and industries must diversify and adapt to the new environment. And that is the important part, the new environment. It is a completely new world today. It is a completely new geo-economic paradigm today, besides the geopolitical. A lot has changed in the last few years, and the COVID-19 pandemic, the last 2 years, has further highlighted or further exacerbated the divides that we see, the fissures that we see, in what seemed to be a very cozy way that the world was going along. What seemed to be, very nice to be able to simply, trade with a few partners, depend on just a few import sources, and expect that, the gravy train will last forever. Well, it doesn't, for obvious reasons, and it cannot. There is, therefore, today the greater realization that we need to do more with more partners. We need to do with more export markets, with more new import sources, with newer ways of doing business. In Australia, I dare say, there is a realization, as Dan Tehan alluded to yesterday, that you need to move on to more ways of working the economy. You cannot depend any longer completely, entirely on, let us say, resources, on simply digging up minerals and metals, of which Australia, and particularly Western Australia, is truly blessed. But you need to do much more. Within even that industry, within the resources industry, you need more value addition to take place within Australia. Australian businesses need to get into new sectors, new industries. They get into manufacturing. They need to get into advanced manufacturing. Now, in many cases, there is incredible R&D happening in Australia, which I have seen. There is incredible innovation happening in Australia that I have seen with my own eyes in the last 10 months. There is tremendous managerial capacity. There's tremendous ability to visualize, and dream and make business plans moving forward. But so much of that then depends on the size of the market, on how to do business. Now, the reality is that while there is great technology, great research and innovation happening in Australia, commercializing it, taking it to scale becomes a challenge simply because of the size of your market. Manufacturing, or even advanced manufacturing beyond a point, becomes a challenge in Australia because of the high-cost nature of your economy. And that's where the partnerships then help. Partnering with a country like India that gives you the scale of a market that you might need, a lovely product being innovated, let us say, in a lab in Western Australia, in Perth, in Melbourne, in Sydney, wherever. Then partnering with India for the Indian market where, even a small order can be terribly, terribly exciting. That becomes possible. You need to get into manufacturing, come to India, manufacture in India, both for India, for Australia, and use it as a production base for the rest of the world. Some Australian companies are already discovering the value of that, but it's insufficient, as the investment numbers themselves show. Now, in many ways, I think one factor that might be responsible for this state of affairs, this more sort of arm's length approach to investing in India and linking up with India more closely than just trade orders or export and import contracts, is what is also called India literacy. It is, I think, the old notions and prejudices amongst many in Australia, certainly many Australian businesses, that they decided 30 years ago, when they might have looked at India, that we are a difficult place to do business in. We've already placed in the too hard to do basket. But I suggest to you that it is actually a new India today. It is a very, very dynamic India today. It is an India where the ease of doing business is today extremely attractive. It is an India which is the second most, if not the most, attractive foreign direct investment market today, attractive destination today. It is in India where infrastructure and logistics chains, supply chains have improved tremendously, where the time from port to the consumer is as little as anywhere else, where the turnaround time for ships and for trucks and for railway wagons is as little as anywhere else in the world, where the corporate taxation is as attractive, in fact, amongst the most attractive on anywhere in the world, where today, because we ourselves also want to fundamentally transform our economy, where we also want to rediscover our manufacturing capacities, where we want to be able to use our very large population, our skilled manpower, our own domestic economy and market, and of course, use our capacities for manufacturing for the rest of the world. Where we are trying to now do this today, we've announced very attractive production-linked incentive schemes, where you come to India, your hand is held from the minute you decide to step into India, from the minute you might even want to think about stepping into India. We now have empowered agencies and departments which will handhold you all the way through, pro bono. You don't have to pay millions of dollars to consultants to come up with your business plans or decide on where to set up an office, where to set up a factory, how to acquire some land, how to get approvals and power connections. We today can handhold you pro bono from start to finish. We've announced these production-linked incentives, as I said, in a large number of sectors, 14 sectors to be precise, and some of which can be of great interest to Australia and to Western Australia, because they are about minerals and metals, they are about technology, they are about electronics, they are about scientific, about defense production, a whole number of things where the more you produce, the greater the incentives become. So as I said, it is a new India today, very attractive India that I hope very much that all of you in business, all of you in promoting business, all of you in encouraging business, and of course the boardrooms themselves. I hope very much that you will look at India in a different light today. You will look at India as this opportunity waiting to be seized. And as I said, you don't have to believe me. I, as High Commissioner, will obviously encourage you to do this. But look at the rest of the world. Look at what everyone else is doing. Read the reports by independent researchers, by the centre here, by others. Read what they are saying, that India is an opportunity for Australia, and India is certainly an opportunity for Western Australia. Critical minerals is a hugely important sector for us, identified again 2 days ago by the two Prime Ministers for much more action and collaborations on. Western Australia is uniquely placed to do that. We wish to actually have value addition done into your resources here in Australia before we take them to India. And that's good news for everybody, including job creation and including moving up the value ladder for Western Australia. I hope very much, therefore, that we will see more in the days to come, months to come. Thank you, Your Excellency, the Deputy Premier, for all you have said about the focus of your government and your own personal focus to the relationship with India. We are here as the High Commission and as our consulates to assist you every step of the way. Please, now that borders have reopened, now that it's possible to travel again, I hope very much, sir, that we can get the direct flight, because if you look at it, a direct flight, let's say from Chennai to Perth, is shorter perhaps than from Perth to some of the northeastern parts of Australia itself. That's how close we actually can be. So I hope very much that all that will become possible with the efforts of the governments and with the efforts of all friends of India and all of you here. Delighted that you could be with me this morning. I hope very much to get to know some of you better as we progress this morning, and later on I'm here for a few more days. Really look forward to doing much more between India and Western Australia in particular. Thank you very much.
When the High Commissioner listed the many stars that have aligned, the Prime Minister's virtual summit, the revised and updated India economic strategy, the Quad summit that was recently held in Melbourne, one thing he didn't indicate as a clear evidence that the stars are aligned is the appointment of a High Commissioner of his experience and caliber to Australia. And that, I think, speaks volumes of the priority that India places on this relationship, and we thank you so much for your remarks. We're not entirely uncivilized. I know this is an early morning. We wanted to make sure that the ambassador had a chance to eat breakfast. Normally, we would like to just drill him with questions, but we wanted to do two things with the remaining 30 or 40 minutes that we've got in terms of time. We wanted to make sure that we launched the report itself and spent a little bit of time talking about it. And so what we've done is we put together a panel for a panel discussion. Now, the first thing, and the High Commissioner figured it out before I made the public announcement, you will note that I am not Sonia Arakkal. And Sonia is a wonderful addition last year to the Perth USAsia team. She is our policy fellow, and she has done a tremendous research over the last year on the India relationship. She took the initial India economic strategy put out by Peter Varghese and the counterpart strategy put out in India by Anil Wadhwa, and kind of put them together, found the common elements, pulled out some kind of shared recommendations. She has run a series of India Beyond Delhi programs together with Austrade that really highlighted how diverse India is and how many areas of connectivity we had. And then most recently today, we have the report that is really the launch of her report today. Unfortunately, Sonia is a close contact and not able to join us this morning. I will note that as a center for the last 2 weeks, knowing that this was our first big week of programs and having international or interstate visitors come in, we have focused heavily on organizational continuity, and I'm sure you probably understand that very well. And so what we did is make sure that all our staff were in different locations. We weren't all together in a single conference room because one close contact would have meant none of us would be here. But we made one key mistake. Everybody was focused on how you could replace Gordon Flake, and it turns out that's the easy thing to do. The hard thing to do is replace Sonia. But I'm going to do my best imitation. Sonia is watching online, and this is being broadcast online. So Sonia, my apologies if I don't get this quite right. But she's done a wonderful report. You've got copies in the back. I hope all of you have copies. But it includes, like every good policy report should be, some very specific recommendations in terms of what she recommends that Australia and India should do to move forward, particularly on the investment side of things. Perhaps more than any other state in the country, and probably more than most countries in the world, West Australians understand trade. You don't have to tell anybody, of the importance of trade to West Australians, but we don't understand the importance of investment nearly enough. And so I think the High Commissioner's remarks really drove that home. This report drives that home. And so what we're going to do right now is kind of launch into a panel conversation that will help us better understand this. I'm going to ask the panelists to come join me up here on the dais for the next 30 minutes or so. They've had a chance to have their breakfast already. Our panel will be composed of Sally Dawkins. Sally is the WA State Representative from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. She joined us just in January after being the Deputy Head of Mission in Ankara, and has had a distinguished diplomatic career with postings in Africa, in Europe, and in the private sector as well. So we're delighted to have Sally join us. We've also got the member of the Board of Directors of the Perth USAsia Centre, introduced earlier, the Honourable Stephen Smith, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, former Minister of Defence. He's currently a professor at UWA, chair of the UWA Defence and Security Institute, chair of the Public Policy Institute, and again on our board. And then last but certainly not least, the new Economic and Trade and Investment Officer for Western Australia in India, Nashid Chaudhary. Nashid was introduced in great detail by the Deputy Premier. So thank you, Deputy Premier, appreciate that. Nashid is going to join us as well. So I'll transition over for a bit of a discussion if I could. Working? There it is. It's perfect. Again, it's wonderful to look out on the audience. I'm sure you've all got a number of questions. I'll do my best to kind of do an initial round of quick questions and then open it up. We have colleagues that will have microphones, which again, I'll note that it will be wiped off between each of the questions to give you a chance to do that. But we wanted to take advantage of the expertise we have here in Western Australia to think about the relationship going forward. And Stephen, I kind of wanted to start with you. Those of you will know that as both Foreign Minister and Defence Minister, Stephen had an awful lot to do with India. And in the 8+ year, nearly 9 years since he was as a minister, has been actively involved in pushing the Perth USAsia Centre and anybody else who will listen to pay more attention to India. He's been, at least when they were being convened in person, a regular participant in the Raisina Dialogue in Delhi. And I've had the great honour of being with him not only in Delhi, but in Mumbai and travelling throughout India in that process. But Stephen, you've seen a tremendous progress in Australia, India strategic relations, security relations, again, partly through your efforts, right? But it doesn't seem that the economic relationship has kept pace. I wonder if you might address kind of what you see the underlying causes for the fact that the economic relationship has lagged, and more importantly, your recommendations or solutions to how we might do better on that front.
Well, you might cause me to list a litany of failures in that, but let me start by saying I've never been more optimistic about the opportunity now for Australia and India, both strategically and economically, including trade and investment, to really now take our relationship to the level that it should have been previously. I think firstly, previously Australia has had a lot of difficulty attracting India's attention, and we've also not been persistent and diligent enough to keep at India day in, day out. It's what I describe as our approach historically was that of a 2020 match, not a test match where you've got to be at it day in, day out. So we've had spurts of trying to attract India's attention, but not longevity. Secondly, what has changed is the strategic environment and India's view of the strategic environment. So for all of the plaudits we might give ourselves about how we've encouraged Quad, how we've encouraged change strategic view, the real impetus for what we see now in terms of some of the mini-laterals, whether it's Quad, whether it was AUKUS, started with a changed view of India in terms of the geostrategic circumstances. And that's all about a changed China. In terms of economics, I think in terms of, if you look at post-World War II Australian economic success, it essentially is off the back of export industries created out of nothing in minerals and petroleum resources, which saw investment come to build those projects, investment from the US, from Japan, from Korea, and subsequently China. And they set up our minerals and petroleum resource industries exporting to Japan, Korea, and China in that order. India never wanted or needed those energy exports, and so there was no easy route to India. And now when we look at our changed strategic circumstances, our changed economic circumstances driven by the understanding that now sanctity, diversity and security of supply chains is actually important, and that's driven by COVID realisation and driven by changed China, then there's a real opportunity for us to do things with India which do see investment right at the heart of it. But some of our failures of the past, firstly, in the mid-1990s, WA had 2 trade and investment offices in India with a promise for 3. And 2 things stopped that from occurring. One was we saw 2 successive minerals and petroleum resource booms to China, which had all of the business community and all of government, state, territory and Commonwealth focused only on one thing called rivers of gold from China. And so that sucked everything out of a view towards India. And the High Commissioner, who gave a very good analysis of some of our failures, but being diplomatic about it, and I'll be blunt, the Australian business community did precisely what the High Commissioner alluded to, which was paid no attention, and then a range of things happened. All the eggs went into China, and the view of India was a lag effect view of India. The High Commissioner is actually quite right. There are Australian business people who I've spoken to over the last half dozen years who tell me how difficult it is to do business in India, who haven't been to India for 20 years. And so we have to now make sure that our business community understands that for diversity and economic reasons, not just security reasons, there is both a need, a real need, and also a real opportunity. Some of our economic failures, I think the Varghese and Wadhwa reports were very good reports. I think we've failed in the Australian context in not having a joint Australia-India business and government implementation task force to drive those. The truth is very many of the Varghese report recommendations and the complementary WAD recommendations have been honoured in the breach. So yesterday's announcements were very helpful to recharge that and bring that back. The High Commissioner made a very strong point about economic integration. And here we've made the point repeatedly, India is not in APEC, India is not in RCEP, and just for good measure, the United States is not in the TPP. And we can't afford to have two of the top 4 economies by the time we get to 2050 and two of our most important strategic and security partners out of that regional economic integration. I'm in a minority here, but I've always believed it was a massive failure of Australian and ASEAN diplomacy to sign up for RCEP without having India either in RCEP or a pathway to join. And so now, how do we get India into APEC? How do we get India into RCEP? And just for good measures, we're now talking about an Australia-India free trade agreement. When we see that free trade agreement emerge, we should pay very close attention to what tradies would call the high quality of that agreement, to see whether that agreement is of a higher quality than RCEP, the same quality of RCEP, or a lower quality of RCEP. My money is that from a trade perspective, it'll be the same quality as RCEP or a lower quality of RCEP. In other words, why didn't we get India into RCEP in the first place? So we have had a litany of failures, and the one essential requirement now is that it's good for the Commonwealth to start saying we're going to recharge, we're going to spend money here and there. The Australian government can only persuade business to start thinking about India by jawboning investment and trade with India as a national priority, and that hasn't happened. And finally, just for good measure, to get something off my chest, I noticed that in the series of announcements, the Commonwealth said that they're going to spend $28 million on an Australia-India Centre. I saw this morning reported that the prime candidates for that centre are Canberra, Brisbane and Sydney. And so, High Commissioner, you might want to, when you go back to Canberra, suggest to the Commonwealth that maybe they could find $28 million to spend on an Australia-India Centre in a place that actually touches the Indian Ocean and is close to India, rather than touching the Pacific and being close to Pacific.
Hardly endorse that sentiment. I appreciate it. If I can turn to you next, Sally, you're in a bit of a difficult spot because in terms of our formal diplomatic relations with India, there's a lot of moving targets. I mean, as mentioned, just yesterday we had the trade minister make an announcement of the updated India economic strategy. We've had a remarkably high-profile and by all accounts successful virtual summit again. The free trade agreement seems to be a bit of a moving target, which makes it hard to comment on. But I wonder if you might give us kind of a sense for the status of, the progress of movement towards a free trade agreement, and then put that in the context of the conversation we're having today, because that's only part of the broader puzzle that we were talking about today. So.
Absolutely, and I think to use the High Commissioner's astrology analogy, the interim arrangement negotiations is just one star in the sort of Milky Way of constellation that we've seen in the Australia-India bilateral relationship over the last couple of years since the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership was signed. We've had unprecedented levels of engagement, both bilaterally and in frameworks like the Quad. But the time is right, we believe, for re-engaging on the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, and we have seen extraordinary momentum towards negotiations on an interim agreement. I think I saw the Minister saying yesterday he's in twice daily contact with his Indian counterpart, which is quite extraordinary. And our negotiators, I know, are working around the clock. A comprehensive trade agreement would, of course, cover market access for a range of sectors: resources and energy, agriculture, food and bev, industrial products. It would cover improved access for firms providing services from India and also cross-border services, and it would provide protections for increasing investor confidence. Now, we're working on an interim agreement. We will only conclude an agreement, interim or otherwise, that delivers balanced and meaningful outcomes. We're going for the high quality, as Stephen alluded to. So we are focused on delivering for Australian industry interests in whatever agreement we do reach. But there is huge momentum towards those discussions. And as you said, I wasn't sure a week ago or even yesterday what I would be able to say today. And I think the Minister this week has continued to indicate his confidence about where we're headed. But I do think that the updated India economic strategy that has been mentioned already this morning is another star in the constellation, because trade alone is not going to be enough, and that's what we're here to discuss this morning. And the strategy, I think, goes into a lot of detail. It's a 5-year plan. It's got some $282 million worth of measures designed to help really integrate our economies at all levels, not just on the trade agreement side. I won't go into a lot of detail about what it contains, but there's practical measures focusing on, I guess, our traditional areas of cooperation, infrastructure, education, tourism, but also looking at those new and emerging opportunities for partnerships, cyber, critical technology, lots of R&D. If you're excited about innovation and tech in India, then this strategy is for you. There's an international space investment initiative where we're going to work with India on communication satellites and navigation technology. There's an innovation and tech challenge where we're going to take 20 entrepreneurs and startups from both India and Australia and help push them, as the High Commissioner said, take it from that small incubation stage, push it to market, push it to scale. So some really practical measures in there, and that's going to be one of the strands, one of the stars in the efforts that we're making to properly integrate our economies.
Thank you. The litany of activities that you just listed there really reminded me of the remarks made by the High Commissioner of how much India has changed and how fast it is changing. The tagline probably could be, if you think you know India, think again, right? There's just so much going on there that even those of us who were there 3 years ago or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, my assumption is you'll go back and you'll be surprised by how dynamic the pace of change is there. At the end of last year, we were fortunate to work with Simone Spencer. Simone's the Deputy Director General of the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, for a public launch of WA's new Trade and Investment Commissioners. And so we had the Deputy Premier speak. We had John Langolant, who went off to be our Agent General in London. We had Nicole Fasana, who's in Northeast Asia, Japan and Korea, and Kirsten Dunson, who is in Southeast Asia, based in Singapore right now. But the obvious omission at that time was we didn't have an appointed Trade and Investment Commissioner for India. And I'm really happy to see that the state government was deliberate and careful and waited until they had the right person, rather than just filling somebody in that role. And as you heard from the Deputy Premier's introduction right now, that right person clearly is you, Nashid. I had a wonderful chance to meet with Nashid last week, and her energy and vision and drive, I think you'll get a sense for it in terms of the potential for that relationship, getting it right. So without putting you on the spot, the Deputy Premier is now gone. Simone is still here, but can you give us a sense for WA's priority and strategy and your own personal priorities and strategies for jump-starting that relationship, given the reconnection that the Deputy Premier laid out so clearly?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me on this panel. I think I'm a byproduct of the 80,000 part of the diaspora that lives here in WA right now, so very proud of that. I'm really proud that we're celebrating 25 years. Yes, it's been a diminished presence, but at the same time, we've still had a steady ongoing presence into the Indian market. And I think that's really, really important to note. And we're now taking it to the next level of growing and expanding our presence. So I think really leveraging these long-term ties, the focus for us or the state government will be around economic prosperity with India and looking at that trade investment piece and that combined together and that intertwinement around economic integration, looking at connectivity, looking at really building that connectivity, so that physical connectivity, the digital connectivity and the people-to-people connectivity is going to be really fundamental to grow that relationship and really positioning WA into the India Gulf region, putting ourselves ahead, being able to say we are here and we are open for business is going to be really, really important. Around trade and investment particularly, the focus is aligned to our Diversified WA strategy, which really leverages off the wealth of what we've done with the mining sector, but being home to a place where we extract 50 different minerals, ranging from critical minerals to rare earth, which are used for smart devices, which is used for electric vehicles. You look at the potash industry that we have, it's exported worldwide, but here within that, as the High Commissioner says, there are opportunities for joint ventures and really being able to grow our clusters here, like the Mets Ignited cluster, into with India around strategic partners. So I think there's a lot in the federal government announcements that are there that WA can actually leverage off. If we look at the energy space, renewable energy, solar, wind, hydrogen is a key focus for the state government. Around hydrogen, there's a number of clusters, and we have partnerships with the India Energy Alliance, and we're looking at how we can grow that connectivity and unlock the potential to grow this supply chain between Australia, between WA and India particularly. If we look at tourism events and creative industries, that soft diplomacy part is so important for us. We hope to hopefully land a Bollywood film here in WA. And years ago, we saw a movie like Salam Namaste and what that did for Melbourne to unlock the visitor, but the educational potential. We'd love to see that with our growing film industry. With tourism as well, the business events piece, we have invested so much in attracting international events coming in. We have Oz Biotech, first time in 15 years coming to WA, and right now we're in discussions with our stakeholders in India about getting the right sort of speakers involved to be able to hear about India, but also getting the right delegations here to be able to build that connectivity. And the MICE industry for India is yet to be unpacked. There is so much work that we're doing right now underway to make that happen. One particular sector very close to my heart is international education. I've worked in that sector for a really long time. And that's that's one of the biggest ways to really unlock this potential. We're really proud to be in a state where India is the largest source, and South Asia comes, as a second to that. And within that, looking at the students, I've had a number of intern students that have worked with me, with source countries from India and Sri Lanka. They're now working in their field. And that's really important. I've had students in cybersecurity who have come and done internships, and they're working in cybersecurity startups and scale-ups in Australia. That's the strength of the diaspora that we want to see happening. We look at space industry. With space, it's quite interesting. Last year we had a milestone where we had our first cube satellite named Bina-1 actually launched out of NASA. So, again, our growing space industry and connecting with what you were talking about would be huge. And we have people in the diaspora, in the Indian diaspora, in the startup, scale-up sector around space. So there is a huge opportunity around that. Health and medical life sciences, we've just launched a strategy last year around health and medical life sciences. So digital health, biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, that two-way partnership is going to be so phenomenal, where India is absolutely a lead in many of these areas. And I sort of think from the other side of aspect, if you look at the well-being aspect, Ayurveda, Ayurveda is a massive ancient Indian health system, but it's a way of life. And, there's approximately around 200 practitioners in the Ayurvedic field right now in Australia. So there's a lot to unpack there. WA has the climate to grow the herbs for Ayurveda and actually produce and export as well. So these are some of the discussions that are currently underway. So there's a lot of aspirational things happening. I think going back to the student cohort, we've got consortia like TVET here, which actually combine the universities and the TAFE sectors. So being able to come with that one voice into India is really important to look at the VET opportunities. We have organisations such as the Australia-India Business Council. We have Mike Carter here, and also Indo-Australian Chamber of Commerce. That bilateral chambers of commerce are going to be really fundamental to unlocking that potential. And actually creating that sense of connectivity. When we talk about investment, Your Excellency, we also roll out the red carpet here. But being able to manage the expectations around the time frame, being able to understand the process of that investment, and that piece of connectivity, being able to welcome and connect our visitors who are coming here to make it their home is going to be really, really fundamental. So that's going to be really important. We currently contribute 17% of Australia and India's total economy. You know, you can imagine with direct links, you can imagine with logistical links, how much more that can grow, because right now it's probably not a very clear reflection of what that trade investment flow is. So once we get those direct links, that could be a better understanding of what that flow is. I haven't even touched on Andhra Pradesh, so we've had this 5-year relationship with Andhra Pradesh, which we are looking into. When we did sign that agreement, there were a lot of things that have changed since that point of time, but there is still so much potential to explore, but also looking at strategic ties with other cities, which has sectors of relevance with Diversify WA is going to be really important. And the last part is that destination positioning piece. You know, we are in the world right now, especially with India as a market, where influencers play such a strong role. You know, social media influencers, media influencers. So we want to be able to be at the forefront of that and get the right sort of influencers to help us build that friendship between Western Australia and India, and also have a say. You know, I think with the federal government strategies coming out, how can we advocate, how can we get a bigger piece of that and really bring WA to that table?
You know, I'm a relatively simple country boy from Arizona, and so over the last 8 years here in interacting with the governor and with Stephen, my vocabulary is slowly improving. And one of the words I learned from Stephen, which I'd never heard before, was mendicant. And this is probably 6-7 years ago. And Stephen made this really powerful comment that when it comes to our relations with India, with Indonesia, with us, we as Australians have for so long thought about what do we have to offer. What expertise do we have? What can we sell? What skills do we have to give? And Stephen really turned that on his head, making you understand that, no, look how big these countries are. Look how fast they're growing. Look how innovative they are. We are the ones who need them. We need their investment. We need their tourists. We need their students in the process. We need their connectivity. And that's the kind of the future that we have. And so powerful word. I've learned it. I've used it several times since. My kids are all mendicants. Hey, look, we're butting up against time, and one of the challenges of doing morning events is that you've all got work to go to. I had hoped to kind of go to quick question and answers. If you don't mind, and we can squeeze them in quick, I'd like to get maybe 2 answers from the floor with a couple of caveats. One evidence of the growing importance of India is that there's probably not an issue in the world today that we don't want to know about India's position. We're very keen to understand India's views on Ukraine. We're very keen to understand India's position in the Quad. But given the restrictions on time and the fact that this is a launch of the Trade and Investment Report, I'd like to get maybe just 2 quick questions on trade and investment kind of issues, turn back to the panel, and then we'll wrap up from there. We'll start here in the middle with Brendan. And I'm going to group them together and then go back to the panel if I could. So.
Great segue. Brendan Augustine, President of the Australian Institute of International Affairs and former proto-investor into India. I failed, unfortunately, on several accounts. But I won't talk about the failures. I'll talk about the solutions. And I was very happy that Sonia highlighted one aspect of her report, which was to see what successful countries are doing in investing in India. And it's a subject that you and I have had a conversation about, and with Jeff Wilson as well, and Sonia, which is the other countries take a much more proactive approach when it comes to supporting investment. Their equivalents of ethics, the export credit agencies of these countries, put a lot of skin in the game. Australia doesn't do that or hasn't done that. We kind of follow the Washington consensus thing. We've just started to do that in the Pacific, and EFIC put in 1.3 billion Australian dollars into that purchase of Digicel in PNG in the Solomon Islands. So I'd like to ask the panel, particularly Stephen, in your experience around the cabinet room, and Sally, in your discussions about what we can do more, not just in India, in terms of encouraging investment. What is the role of EFIC? What is the role of providing support, the likes of which Sonia has highlighted, coming from Japan, Germany, and the UK, the kind of skin in the game? I don't want to sound like a mendicant businessman looking for government support, but that's effectively what's happened, and it's been successful.
Spectacular. And again, I really appreciate you highlighting one of the core areas of Sonia's ongoing research is benchmarking what other countries are doing. So I'm going to come back to you, Sally and Stephen, real quickly. One final question before we kind of wrap up. Anybody else have a final question we want to offer? If not, we're already at time. We'll go with the gentleman in the far back, but just quick and pithy if you might, so we can keep to time there. Microphone right there real quick.
Two quick points. One is the comment made by both the High Commissioner and Stephen Smith, and that relates to India literacy. WA has traditionally been one of the strongest centres for the study of India. That has actually lapsed a lot over the following few years. I agree entirely with Stephen Smith. That new centre should be here. If it's not, I would encourage the state government to create its own and invest heavily in understanding India from all of the sorts of aspects that we've had in the past. Second quick point is around international students. I agree entirely with that. But again, the correlation of the way in which we match up our approach, I'm told at the moment that 1 out of every 2 applications from India is being rejected automatically. That needs to change. Thank you.
Beautiful. So the Deputy Premier had a heavy focus on reconnection, but it's clear there's a lot of our activities that need to be rejuvenated as well, restarting that process. So quick final comments from you, Sally, and then we'll go to you, Stephen, for the last word there.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. I think the countries that are mentioned in the report are, of course, very close economic and strategic partners for Australia as well, and so we welcome their engagement with India, and we do look to learn what lessons we can from them. But we do need to take account of Australia's very unique economy and also our traditional history. So one example in the report, as mentioned, UK, Germany, Japan have got really big international development programs with India, whereas Australia doesn't have that history of a donor-recipient relationship. We've got a very small direct aid program. So we're starting from a different place there, and the $282 million of measures that are included in our strategy, that's not aid money, that's investment facilitation money. So we are trying to put skin in the game. I'll just mention a few of the investment-focused elements of that strategy because it is very tangible, very practical. Looking at improving efforts to understand India from Australian portfolio investors, particularly superannuation investors. We want to renew the MOU between Austrade and India Invest to keep the investment flows that way. We're looking for a reciprocal solution to cross-border taxation for technical services. So we're going to use the Australia-Indian double taxation agreement to try and fix that little problem. And then continuing negotiations around investor protection rules to help provide more of that certainty and legal protections for investors. So those are some of the tangible investment-focused measures in the strategy. And the last point I would just make is about the upcoming Australia-India Infrastructure Forum, which is designed to try and help smooth the pathway for Australian businesses who want to take the opportunity of these vast infrastructure plans and potential happening in India, pulling together all of the policy, corporate and regulatory expertise, helping foster those business-to-business ties, creating awareness about the opportunities, including for Australian niche service providers who might not realise that they have got the opportunity to plug into these huge investment infrastructure projects in India. So hopefully that will help connect Australian business into the infrastructure world, and hopefully that goes to address some of the gaps that are identified in the report around investment ties.
Thank you. Stephen, final word.
Well, firstly, on our Indian expertise, when I finished my law degree decades ago, I went back to UWA and finished off my arts degree part-time and did that in South Asian studies. And at that time, UWA's South Asian department was regarded as the best in the country, better than the ANU. We no longer have such a department, and that's sort of replete across various institutions. Secondly, I agree with you and share your enthusiasm for the international students and Indian students being really at the core of what we're doing. I think that's a point that's been reinforced. One thing which you referred to, but we haven't really focused on, one of the real advantages we now have is the Indian diaspora. So 750 to 800,000 Indian diaspora here, on track to 1 million. 1 million people out of 26 million people can make a difference, and the Indian diaspora is connected, clicked in, interested in politics, in public life, in business and the like. So that's helping to change the dynamic. And so all of the great areas you listed are all primed to the Indian diaspora taking part in that. On investment, it is a case that India's eyes have changed in the strategic and security sense, And there are a whole range of things where we have expertise, where there's a security or a strategic link, but which can go to other areas of activity. And I think this is going to be one of the early areas of potential investment. So cybersecurity is a classic example. Space, a whole range of technology areas where we're actually very good, where we've got startups and scale-ups, including members of the Indian diaspora. And that'll be an area where our respective governments and the security institutions are keen to invest to get a defence or a deterrence application, and that'll then flow to a more general application. Finally, to finish on Brendan's point, I think this is an issue which transcends just the Australia-India relationship, which is how do we now approach and apply ourselves versus how do we now approach and apply ourselves as a government and as a country when it comes to providing capital to all of these areas of potential investment. Now, here's our problem. Strategically, in the security sense, the world has changed. We're now dealing with a changed China, with integrated deterrence and defence, and with a very conscious eye to diversity and security of supply chains. The one thing which hasn't yet changed is the playbook that we're looking from the 1980s about how we would approach the management of the economy. And that was all about economic efficiency, global competitiveness, government not interfering, government not picking winners, not doing this or that. Well, the world's changed, but what we now need to see is we need to see a changed financial and economic approach by governments of the day to make investment decisions or to assist industry in making investment decisions which have a strategic security and economic outcome. And I think that's our single biggest challenge. If you look at the area of critical minerals, which is another great opportunity for us, everyone is now mantra chanting, as the Quad has been for 3 or 4 years, we need diversity and security in critical minerals, also in electric vehicle metals. Well, I regret to advise the single biggest hurdle in that is small companies, whether they're in WA or Australia, finding access to capital or getting offtake agreements which don't go straight back to China. And when people go to the Commonwealth and they say, we've got this opportunity here in critical minerals or in electric vehicles, we're trying to raise capital, we can't find any sources of capital, the only place we can go is China, the Commonwealth's response is essentially good luck. Now, this is a qualitatively different approach that Japan now takes. Japan has been funding critical minerals strategically for a half a dozen years. Lynas, which is the only Australian company or the only non-Chinese company which gives some diversity of supply chain in critical minerals, was for a time a wholly owned subsidiary of Japanese investment banks, guided by the government saying this is a strategic investment, do it. Lynas operates in Malaysia, courtesy of Japanese financing. So the Japanese have actually been the best at working out how can we have agencies or instruments of government who help industry make strategic decisions and give access to capital when they need it. Currently, in electric vehicles, whether it's lithium, nickel, cobalt, and the like, needed to create electric vehicles, the supply chain there is exactly the same as in critical minerals, other than you don't have a Lynas. So all of the offtake agreements, all of the funding, all goes back to China. And so this is, in my view, across the board, our single biggest challenge, not just for how do we encourage Australian industry to invest and get capital for investments and projects in India, it's across the board. And that's a body of work which just hasn't been done at Commonwealth level.
Well, I'm looking at Sonia watching us online. I hope we've done justice to the launch of your report. There's copies of it in the back. For those of you watching online, this is available on our website as well. We are really honored to have had the High Commissioner join us here this morning. Those of us in the policy community who work on Australia-India relations will almost always say that our real objective is to move beyond the trite conversation of cricket, curry, and Commonwealth. But it turns out that thanks to Sonia, we have representatives from the T20 World Cup here, and I've been watching the Twitter feed. There are more pictures being taken of the T20 Cup there in the back than there is probably of my face. So clearly that is still something that's very powerful in the relationship. I had a close colleague of mine from India that I worked with years ago who told me that if you really want to understand Indian food, you have to understand eating Indian food outside of India is like listening to an old cassette tape. The younger generation may not understand that, an 8-track tape, whatever, right? But eating Indian food in India is like listening to a symphony live. And Stephen can attest from our travels together, there are several occasions at the table where I actually started crying. It was so beautiful. So I really can't say anything like that. And then obviously Western Australia has recently decided to rejoin the Commonwealth. So there we have it. We've got them covered here today. Look, on behalf of the Perth USAsia Centre, thank you for coming for the launch of our report. Thank you again to the High Commissioner. Thank you to this wonderful panel. And thank you to all of you. Please join me in rounding up the event.